Hello everyone, this is Melvin. Welcome back to my channel. Today I want to talk about a solo role-playing game called Disciples of Bone and Shadow. But before I start, I want to ask you a question. Have you ever played a solo role-playing game and think to yourself, well, all this narrative creation, journal writings are great and fun, but, well, I miss the gaming part of them. If you ever thought of that, then you're not alone because I've always had that question in mind, especially when I am playing some of the so-called modern narrative-driven solo role-playing games. Examples like the really popular Iron Swan, as well as the kickstarted version of it, that is the Starforge. Or maybe you are playing some other newer narrative-driven role-playing games that are not designed for solo but can easily be adopted as one. The likes of the Year Zero engine games like Forbidden Lands or Mutant Year Zero. They are all really great in terms of creating narratives, but sometimes I miss the gaming part of some of the older role-playing games. So if you have that question, then I think Disciples of Bone and Shadow might be suitable for you. So in front of us here is the Conquered Sun edition. This is a game published by the Exalted Funeral, and this is designed and written by Alex T from Blackoath Games. This version is a self-printed copy that I printed out using the PDFs. This is obviously in A4 size and in hardback cover. I think it is always easier to read when books are in A4 size. But if you buy it from the Exalted Funerals, they are obviously a soft copy, soft cover, and also in about A5 size. So the reasons why I say this game might be for those of you who want more games in your narrative solo role-playing game is that I personally think this is the best all-in-one solo role-playing games in the market. And the reason behind that is because the author, Alex T, have packed almost everything you need in terms of both a solo role-playing game and also a game like a hex crawl or a dungeon crawl game. And the way that he did it is that he obviously includes a lot of rolling tables, or in his words, tools that allows you to simply generate everything you need whenever you play a role-playing game. So I'm going to flip through this book and just show you what I mean by that. So first of all, you can see this is a well-designed book. The art in it is just excellent. For example, these arts are really, really nice. And if I give you a little bit of introduction, Disciples of Bones and Shadow is a role-playing game designed to be played solo, although it could be played with other players, even a game master, if so desired. The game takes place in a dark and dangerous place called the Fractured Dominion and the land surrounding it, where the only constants are conflict, suffering, and eternal twilight. So as you can see, this is one of those games that are, obviously on the grimmer tone. So this is the, if you like, the Dark Soul kind of world where everything is bleak, and generally there's not a lot of people around, there's no huge cities, and so forth. So this is obviously perfect for solo role playing, because that is a a setting that make sure that you don't have too many history that you need to worry about, or too many politics that you need to worry about. It is more a sword and sorcery theme kind of games where you don't need to worry too much about world building and so forth. Although that's being said, this game does come with a lot of backgrounds, which is interesting on their own, and I will definitely show you a bit later. So to start with the character creation, this is a game that is different from obviously the likes of Dungeons and Dragons or some of the OSRs. There is simply no class in this game. You can do whatever you want. It is everything is tested through the attributes as well as the skill levels. So these attributes are your classic strengths, dexterities, constitution, will, intelligence, and charisma. And I think the maximum of these attributes are 20 each. So in that sense, you basically, whenever you a test that that is basically related to each of these attributes, you just need to roll a d20. And this is a rolling under system. So under or equal system. So basically you have, if you have 15 in strength, then you simply, whenever you do any actions that will require you to do a strength test, you need to roll 15 or less. So in terms of the skill system itself, it is one of the more old school approach where all these individual skills are split out. So you basically have alchemy as one skill, but first aid as another skill, and things like forbidden law and herbs laws are different. And again, these are D100, so these are going from 0 to 100%, and basically if you have a 55 in one-hand melee, then you basically have a 55% of being successful. So you roll less than 55 to indicate that you are successful in terms of doing that action. So as you can see, there is a lot of skills in this game, and some people think that is not necessarily a good thing, but in my opinion, I think there is a really important reasons why some of the old school games include these skills. And the reason is to gamify the role-playing experience. And by means of gamifying, what I mean is, if you think about the newer narrative-driven role-playing games, again, I'm using Iron Sworn as an example. So in Iron Sworn, everything has been stripped down to the basic format. So for example, if you want to create a potion, instead of having to test your alchemy skill, it probably will be something like gain an advantage, where you basically try to brew a potion, either to drink or use it as a toxic potion on your enemy. And that is basically everything is being grouped to gain an advantage. And even if you're doing other things like finding a high ground, or finding a cave to hide, they can also be considered as gain an advantage. Now, obviously, that means that they are very adaptive. That way of thinking, an action is, it means that you can use that same actions in almost any situations or any theme or any settings. But the beauty of using these detailed skills is that it allows players to treat the role-playing game as a game. So for those of you who played old school RPGs, you probably know that these skills can be manipulated, for example, with potions. For example, there is obviously the strength potions, the classic potion that will increase your strength for, I don't know, DX turns or DX minutes and so forth. And effectively what it means is you can manipulate your attributes and also your skill levels through your actions in the game. And in that turn, you will basically treat your your actions in as a puzzle that you need to solve. So how can I increase my alchemy skills high enough so that I can pass a certain test? Maybe I need to brew a specific potion, or should I get a blessing from the temple, or even have some kind of magical artifacts that will increase your skills, and that is simply missing in the more narrative driven games. Well, in the older games where everything is in detailed skills, that kind of interaction is more encouraged. So after the skills, there are also some passive skills that will always be active whenever you have already learned it, or if you decide to activate them. That is all good and well. And apart from that, there is also some archetypes. So these are more like the class that we have, but they're not necessarily exactly the same. These are more like achievements, if you like. Basically, if you have a certain skill levels or attribute levels, then you are more likely to be able to do certain things, rather than saying if you are not that class, you can't do that thing. So you can still do things generally, no matter what class or what skill level you are. You can always try it at least. So in that sense, there is still a lot of room for players to try out whatever they want in this game. So apart from the normal skills, passives, and these kind of archetypes, this is where Alex, the designer, packs in some of the more modern design of the narrative and role-playing game. So there is obviously these character flaws, for example, where there is no there's no really a huge game mechanics in it. It is more a narrative driven side where whenever the players do certain actions, they always need to put in their mind that to remember their character has certain flaws. Although there is a little rules over here, I think it's over here, saying that each flaw has 3 levels that will give your character, if you picked a certain flaws for your characters, and depending on the level, it will give you extra enhancement points that you can use on other skills. So in that terms, it again goes back to that point where I mentioned that this game gamifies the role-playing experience. So it's not just about doing the narrative, but there is some mechanical results of doing any actions, or even picking a specific flaws for your character. Okay, so the next ones are the classic advantage and disadvantages. Now, one thing I have to say is that this game is definitely including everything you need, but not necessarily in a huge quantity. So what I mean by that is, obviously you can see these ones advantages. There are D20 tables over here. So compared to some of the other books that are specifically used for just generating character advantages or disadvantages, where they pack in like a D100 tables, then obviously there is less options. But again, I don't think that anyone will normally exhaust all these options through the normal gameplay. So obviously this is the disadvantages, and there is also the home region. Again, nicely done. This is in a D10 table, so for those of you who don't want to pick a specific regions, you can just roll on a die. So the next one are edges and mementos. These are like the little things that differentiate your characters from the normal folks. And again, this is pretty good because again, it gives you D20 tables that you can roll on to give you a little trinkets that you can bring with you. Again, there's not a lot of gameplay mechanics, although you can still sell obviously these items. But you know, this is kind of the normal practice of solo role-playing games where you give your character a little trinket or something to, you know, basically generate a little background story for both the character and these items. Now, this is the more interesting part of it. This is the character advancement. So effectively, this game is about leveling up and, you know, gaining more skills and gaining more loot as any other solo role-playing games. And what I liked about this game is that it gives you a very specific rules on what will trigger a increase of experience points. And that includes, for example, every time you explored a hex, every time you successfully cast a spell, every time you dismantled a trap, or you know you pass a persuasion. So this is pretty nice because there is a very clear goal of what you can do or what you should do in terms of each gameplay to try to improve your characters. Other role-playing games, they did probably something differently, somehow differently. So, you know, in Forbidden Lands, for example, there's a very interesting rules to where you know whenever your character participated in a gameplay night, then you automatically gain an experience, which is kind of funny because it is quite hard for, you know, solo players to not cheat that system, but that's it. So this is the core rule part. So as I mentioned a bit earlier, the basic is roll less than your attributes, and so that is pretty straightforward. The nice part again that I love about this book is that it goes into the details of, for example, letting you know what kind of degree that you're going to get. So if you played any solo role-playing games, this is something that is very important because it tells you how successful is your action when you don't have a game master to tell you that. And the way that it does is basically it compares the difficulties with the percentage that you have. So again, this is something that everyone knows who played who played role-playing games would know that, you know, the higher you roll, the more successful you are, or in this term, the lower you roll, the more successful you are, because that is the gap between your skill level and the dice test that you rolled on. So using the example here, the character has a crafting score of 67, and the requirement is obviously less than 67. When she rolls a 34, it means that comparing that with 67, there is a gap of 23. Sorry, 33 in between. And 33 in between basically gives you a great degree of success. So that is that's really good, because this is again one of those things that, although a more seasoned solo role-playing game player might be able to think up or you know, house rules on the fly, nevertheless, it is always good to have the book itself, the rule set specifically stated out that that is the case. So again, there are some difficulty modifiers. Again, pretty good because it tells you, whenever if you define a specific hard actions, you should -20 to your skill. And again, random difficulty tables. This is again goes back to that point where the designer puts all the tools you need. You basically don't have to map this table with your own D4, D7, or D4, D10 tables. It is written there for you to use. So into the combat, I don't think there's a lot to discuss in the combat. It is pretty straightforward. I have to say this is not the most evolved combat system around. So there's not a lot of zones. They're not talking about looking at the range of the between the enemies and the characters. But generally, it is sufficient, I would say. So let's go to the next part. So magic. I think the magic system in this game is again pretty good. Although, as you can see again here, it is not the most expensive magic system around. So there are 24 magics over here that you can roll on. Although there are more magic types, so there are including death magic, for example, and I think there's necromancy included as well. So again, there's not a huge number of magics, because I think magic again is kind of a rare thing, as mentioned in the book, in the Fractured Dominion. So it is more associated with the bad guys rather than the characters that you'll be using, and that's why there's a gameplay mechanics that if you succeed in, if you fail a specific test when you roll on your spell, then you will gain a corruption level. So this is one of those things that are being added for you to track. Like health or stress level, for example, that make sure that you don't overuse the magic powers, and also it allows you obviously to generate a little bit of role playing or storytelling as well. So the next one is the magical items. So I would say this is again very nicely thought out, because one of the example here is the intelligent items. For those of you who watch the old fantasy movies that has magical relics in there, there's always a theme where the movies are talking about is whether it is the items that controls the master or the master that controls the item. And it is very nice for the designer, Alex T, to include these kind of tables here where you can always do a test to see who controls who, whether the item has corrupted the master, or whether the character has the items in control. So again, this is a beautiful piece of art. I think this is one of the best in this book. So alchemy. Again, this is something that is we often seen in many games. And this is again a really nice thought out system where you can always pick plants and you can mix and match them together, and it will create potions of different effects, and then you basically write it down, and next time you come up with the same plants, when you collect the same plants, when you buy them from the shops, for example, then you know that you can use that recipe as a to create the same potions. And again, nice little additional tables where you get additional things like you can augment the effect of the potion rolling based on the situation, or simply because you want to just roll the dice and see if it gives you a reduced effect potion, for example. Okay. Next is exploring the world, and I think this is again one of the great thing about this game. So as I mentioned at the start, this game comes with two things. So it comes with hex crawl rules, and also it comes with a dungeon crawl rules. So for those of you who played any hex crawl games, you will recognize these kind of tables where you are going to start at a specific point. I think in this game you can just start randomly, or you can start from the number 1, for example, and each time you travel to another hex, then you normally need to roll on a number of tables to see where you are at, and whether you're gonna experience any encounters. And that's the same for this game, and that's where I mentioned that this is an all-in-one package where it includes rules specifically designed for hex crawl adventures. And that's great because in a lot of times traveling is becoming a narrative chore for many people when they're playing role-playing games. They would simply just want to skip it at times, because they can't think of too many interesting encounters at the end just by themselves. So having these kind of specific hex crawl rules where you need to roll on your orientation skills, otherwise you might get lost. And also there are a specific travel complication where there is gameplay mechanics is always a good thing, because it means that you can spend more time thinking about the overall stories rather than on that moment where you don't necessarily need a really detailed stories. You just want some clues or something to tell you what happened, and this is just perfect for that. And again, going back to what I mentioned earlier, there are so many little tables like this that give you all the details you need. So instead of having you going out to external resources or materials, you can simply just use this role-playing material for everything you need. So again, terrain types, that's great. Weather table as well. Again, camping mishaps, one of the classics for any hex crawl games. Again, you can see there are specific gameplay mechanisms where you will get -1 conditions, -1 charisma, just like the old school role-playing games. And again, it is great because it just means that you can focus more on the things that are interesting, and this will let you play it like a board game where there's a mechanical result, but at the same time you don't need to spend too much effort thinking about what happened during that camp night. So next one, again, hunting and foraging mishap. That is great. So the next one is the dungeon crawling part of it. So there's a really nice little chart to show how the dungeons are generated. So this is actually very similar to all the other dungeon crawls, like the 100 dungeons or the 4 Against Darkness. So anyone who played those will know how it works. Basically, you will have a starting location, and then you are going room by room or room to corridors, and you will roll on a table to see what kind of results, how many doors are there, are they locked or not. If they're locked, do you need to pass a test to open it, and so forth. So again, this is just great for solo gameplay because again, in the narrative kind of solo role-playing games, you will not find these kind of specifically designed dungeon crawl rules. Using again the newer games like Iron Sworn as an example, even though there's a delve expansion where they flesh out the dungeon delve part, they are still more about narrative generation rather than a mechanical or game mechanics driven gameplay. So again, not all dungeon needs to be a storytelling piece. I mean, sometimes you just want to go into a dungeon, you know, set off some traps, and hopefully get out alive with some treasures, some money, and so forth. So again, this is just great for that because it means that you can have this in your game. Now, obviously, you can still, if you want, have a narrative piece that is, you know, just really a cinematic experience in a cave or in a dungeon. You can still do that, but you know, this is just there for you to pick and use, and this is all with the base game, so you don't need to use another expansion. You don't need to use external resources. So the next one is some of these settlement generations. Again, these are your typical name generations, you know, first impressions, what kind of government it has. Again, these are not the most detailed tables. These are more like D10s, and you know, there are basically 4 options in there, even though it's a D10. But there's enough for you to generate an interesting settlement that you don't need to go to external resources. I think that is the most precious thing about this game. So again, the random settlement events. So again, some of them have the gameplay mechanics where you lose the 100 jets as the currency in this game. So that's great. More event. So more things. So like pickpocket items, whether you get pickpocket or you try to pickpocket some of the locals. And gambling rules, again, a little mini game for you to play. Human encounters, so this is just another example that you can generate an NPC on the fly, whether there's the occupations or, you know, whether they're hostile or not. The attitude, again, just 3 options, but still enough for you to generate a interesting NPC. So even age, gender, you know, whether if they are hostile, neutral, and friendly, they have different kind of attitude as well. Your classic character descriptor, so you don't need to go to external resources to find these descriptions. Motivations, nouns and verbs. Basically, you can pair 2 to get a sense of what they want to achieve. Mark of taint, again, you know, they could have some marks that are tainted enemies and so forth. So that is great. Group size, again, how many characters you have seen. So again, this is like the old school advanced Dungeons and Dragons game master guide, where you have tables almost for everything you need. Although obviously not as expensive as the that book, but this is written for solo play. So everything you need for solo play are included. So advanced rules, so this is for players who want to include like professional counting and so forth, you know, more things like how to scale up the threat levels, for example. NPC behaviors, again, this is great when you have an NPC companions. They might do things that you don't want them to do, or they might come out to be more heroic than they seem. So really great stuff. These are all the tools that you will need. So again, when they do specific thing, there will be a specific mechanical result that is also great. So this is about hiring a companion, so different kinds of companions with specific skills. Again, this is great. You can always use this for generating an NPC as well. So yeah, that's pretty much it. That's the player part. So in the next video, we will go into the gameplay for the Game Master emanations. This is, again, another piece that is very important. This is where the narrative part is being driven. So first of all, we have discussed about all the gameplay the mechanical part, the player-driven part. This is where the stories, the plots, or some of the story arcs, missions can generate and how they are handled in this game. So yeah, that is part 1 of my flip through of Disciples of Bone and Shadow. And I will see you in the next video where we discuss the gameplay, the Game Master emulators, and more stuff. Thank you for watching. Talk to you later. Bye bye.